49ers fans, I want you to hear the exact specific words Christian McCaffrey himself used to describe what happened, because on the surface, they genuinely make this sound like absolutely nothing at all worth discussing further. The same way you fight with your brothers as kids, sometimes you get in scuffles with your teammates. McCaffrey told reporters after the very first padded practice of training camp produced a genuine brawl between him and linebacker Greenlaw. Just another day at the office, nothing more than that. That was the public line, a star running back and a star linebacker getting physical on the first day of pads, both playing it off as completely normal, business as usual training camp intensity. McCaffrey even joked afterward that he genuinely couldn't remember a single training camp across his entire career, on any team he's ever played for, that didn't produce some kind of first pads fight between teammates. Case closed, at least according to the two players actually directly involved in the incident themselves. And at 12:51 this exact afternoon, on a live radio hit that quickly went viral across virtually every single 49ers outlet covering the Bay Area, a reporter with genuine, real locker room sourcing said something that has completely reframed why this specific fight, out of all the countless routine camp scuffles that happen every single summer around this entire league, actually mattered this much. Before you scroll off, I'm telling you right now, by the very end of this video, I'm going to tell you the specific, precise detail that reporter revealed about exactly what Greenlaw reportedly said in the huddle immediately before that specific play. A detail that genuinely changes the entire read on whether this was really just brothers roughhousing or something considerably more pointed and personal. I'm also going to tell you what a second-team source said, entirely independently, less than half an hour later, that has genuinely made this story impossible to fully wave away as pure, ordinary camp noise. Stay with me all the way through this entire one from start to finish. Do not click off early. Here's how it all actually went down, step by step. The broadcast is running its regular afternoon training camp check-in segment, cycling through injury updates and general roster notes from around the entire division, when the host stops mid-sentence to bring in a reporter who's clearly been holding something back for a while. She doesn't wait for a proper full introduction from the host before diving straight in. I have to say this now because I genuinely don't think people fully understand what actually triggered that fight on Friday afternoon, and the entire tone in the room shifts immediately and visibly. She delivers, and this is close to a direct word-for-word transcript. I want to be genuinely careful here, because I'm not saying this was some deep, personal, long-running feud between these two guys. But my understanding, from multiple people who were actually out on that practice field, is that the specific play which sparked this wasn't remotely random or arbitrary. Greenlaw, in the huddle right before it, reportedly made a pointed, direct comment about McCaffrey's own workload management last season, specifically referencing the significant games he missed in 2024, and openly questioning in front of several other defensive players standing right there whether this offense could actually function reliably through a physical, contact-heavy camp if their single best player wasn't going to be consistently, fully available for it. McCaffrey reportedly heard every word of it clearly. On the very next play, contact between the two of them got noticeably, unmistakably more personal than a standard first pads rep usually calls for. Read that back. Questioning in front of other defensive players whether the offense could actually function if their best player wasn't going to be fully available for it. That is an extraordinarily specific claim, not a vague sense that things got heated, but a precise account of exactly what was reportedly said, to whom, and why it would have landed as a direct public challenge to McCaffrey specifically rather than a generic training camp collision. And less than half an hour later, as I promised, a second independent team source, speaking on background to a different outlet entirely, offered a strikingly similar characterization without any coordination between the two reports. There's been an undercurrent all camp about accountability, about who's actually available and who isn't, the source said. Adre's never been shy about saying what he thinks needs to be said, even to a guy making McCaffrey's money. That's just who he is. You read that back. Dre's never been shy about saying what he thinks needs to be said, even to a guy making McCaffrey's money. That is a second, entirely separate source independently corroborating the exact same broader dynamic. A veteran defender willing to challenge the offense's biggest star directly, regardless of contract status, without either report appearing to draw from the same original conversation. Now the whiplash, because I already know what you're thinking. McCaffrey and Greenlaw both said this was nothing. McCaffrey specifically said he has genuine respect for Greenlaw. Why would there be a hidden, pointed explanation for something both players themselves downplayed? And here's the honest answer, and it requires understanding exactly how professional athletes typically handle exactly this kind of moment in public. Players almost never publicly escalate a teammate conflict, regardless of what actually triggered it, because doing so creates exactly the kind of distraction that hurts both individuals and the locker room as a whole, heading into a real season. McCaffrey calling it brothers roughhousing doesn't necessarily mean nothing specific triggered it. It means both players made the mature, professional choice to move past it publicly, rather than let one heated moment define the entire relationship. Stay with me, because once you understand exactly why McCaffrey's own recent availability has become a genuine, ongoing storyline inside that building, this stops looking like a random first pad scuffle and starts looking like the visible symptom of a real, uncomfortable tension that's been building quietly all off-season. 3 reasons this reporting carries real weight. Reason 3 is where the deepest layer lands. Reason number 1. McCaffrey's own missed time in recent seasons has been a genuine, documented storyline for this organization, not a fabricated narrative invented to explain a fight after the fact. Linebacker Drake Greenlaw himself was previously quoted, unprompted, identifying McCaffrey as the clear engine of this entire offense. Precisely the kind of dependency that makes availability concerns genuinely, legitimately relevant to a defense trying to gauge exactly what they're actually preparing against heading into the season, not an unfair or personal attack invented out of nowhere. Reason number 2. And this is the tactical detail specific to why Greenlaw, of all players on this roster, would be positioned to say something this direct. Greenlaw has a well-documented reputation across multiple seasons in this building as one of the most vocal, accountability-driven veterans on the entire defense, a player who has never been shy about calling out perceived lapses in effort or availability from teammates regardless of their star status. Exactly the kind of established pattern that makes this specific account entirely consistent with everything already known about his personality. And before I get to reason 3, because reason 3 is the specific huddle detail, talk to me in the comments. 49ers fans, real question. Does learning there might be a specific pointed comment behind this fight change how you view McCaffrey's own just brothers roughhousing explanation, or does it still feel like a normal camp overreaction regardless of what triggered it? Go. Reason number 3, the huddle detail. Ready? Questioning in front of other defensive players whether the offense could actually function if their best player wasn't going to be fully available for it. Read that back. This is an extraordinarily precise claim, not a generic sense that words were exchanged, but a specific account of the exact substance of what was reportedly said, delivered in front of a specific group of witnesses about a specific sensitive topic. When a report can identify not just that a comment was made, but its precise content and its precise audience, and that account is then independently corroborated by a second source describing the same underlying personality dynamic without apparent coordination, that convergence is exactly what separates informed reporting from pure speculation. Now, the skeptic, a national radio host, pushed back hard on air. Come on. McCaffrey himself said this was normal, said he respects Greenlaw, said this happens literally every single training camp he's ever been part of. Are we really going to manufacture a hidden grudge out of the single most predictable moment in the entire NFL calendar? The first padded practice of camp? Sometimes guys just get physical when the pads finally go on. And listen, that skepticism is completely fair and grounded in real, established pattern. First pads fights are genuinely one of the most common, predictable events across the entire league every single summer, and treating every single one as evidence of a deeper conspiracy would be a real overreach most of the time. But here's the counter. Nobody is claiming first pads intensity itself is unusual. That part is exactly as routine as the skeptic describes. What's specifically being reported is the precise verbal trigger that made this particular collision escalate into an actual fight, rather than a standard, forgettable training camp rep. That distinction between routine physical intensity and a fight specifically sparked by a pointed verbal exchange about a sensitive, real topic is exactly what a purely camp gets physical explanation doesn't fully account for on its own. Here's the part of this story with real human weight to it. Christian McCaffrey has spent his entire career being defined in equal measure by generational talent and genuine real fragility when it comes to staying on the field, missing significant chunks of the 2024 season specifically. Whether or not the exact huddle quote is reported with perfect precision, the underlying tension, a locker room quietly, privately wrestling with how much to actually build around a player whose ceiling and whose availability have both been extreme in recent years, is exactly the kind of real, unresolved dynamic that produces genuine, uncharacteristic flashpoints like this one. But I owe you the honest caveat. This reporting, however specific, still traces back to characterizations of a brief, chaotic, in-the-moment exchange that neither player has publicly confirmed in any detail, and both Mccaffrey's and Greenlaw's own public comments remain the team's official, on-record position, regardless of what this additional reporting suggests happened underneath it. Let's also touch on the emotional layer that makes this specific storyline resonate beyond just one training camp afternoon. McCaffrey has spent much of his career being described alternately as one of the most complete offensive weapons in modern football and as a genuine injury risk whenever a season stretches long enough. Both labels are simultaneously true, and both were, according to this reporting, compressed into a single pointed comment on a single practice field, in front of teammates who all understand exactly how much this specific offense's ceiling depends on him staying healthy for a full 16 or 17 games rather than 12 or 13. Let's talk about the broader locker room implications here too, because a genuine, even if brief, flashpoint between the offense's undisputed centerpiece and one of the defense's most respected veteran voices carries weight far beyond just these two individuals personally. Greenlaw is, by nearly every account out of that building, one of the emotional anchors of this entire defense. A player younger teammates look to for exactly how much intensity and honesty is expected inside these walls. If Greenlaw genuinely felt comfortable challenging McCaffrey this directly, this openly, even in a heated, in-the-moment exchange, that tells you something real and specific about the actual accountability culture this locker room has deliberately built over time, one where star status and star salary clearly don't exempt anyone from being challenged by a teammate who's genuinely earned the standing to say something and be heard. Let's also talk about how quickly this kind of story typically resolves itself once training camp settles into its normal, predictable rhythm. First Pad's intensity, even when it produces a genuine fight, almost always fades within days, as players settle into the actual grind of camp and stop testing every single boundary the way the first padded practice inevitably invites. Whether the specific verbal trigger reported here actually resurfaces in any visible way, or simply becomes a quiet, forgotten footnote once real preseason evaluation genuinely begins, is exactly the kind of open question worth tracking closely over these next several weeks, rather than confidently assuming either outcome in advance. Let's also talk about what this means for how the coaching staff actually manages messaging around McCaffrey specifically going forward. Kyle Shanahan has been notably protective of McCaffrey's workload in recent public comments, repeatedly emphasizing controlled, deliberate rep counts rather than pushing him through every single practice period at full intensity. If Greenlaw's reported comment reflects a genuine, real undercurrent of frustration among some players about that specific management approach, even among players who genuinely respect McCaffrey's talent as much as anyone in that building, that's a real, ongoing internal dynamic worth watching closely as the actual regular season approaches and real workload decisions start mattering in live games rather than just isolated practice reps. Let's actually dig deeper into McCaffrey's specific 2024 absence, because I think understanding exactly what happened that season is essential context for why Greenlaw's reported comment, if accurate, would have landed with this much weight. McCaffrey missed the overwhelming majority of that season dealing with a lingering knee and Achilles issue, and the 49ers offense without him looked genuinely different, less explosive, less versatile in exactly the ways that had defined this team's identity for years. That specific, well-documented real dependency is precisely what makes any public questioning of his overall reliability land as a genuine, substantive challenge worth taking seriously rather than an empty jab, regardless of who's actually delivering that challenge or in what specific practice context it happens to surface. Let's talk about what actually happens next inside that building, because I think the practical stakes matter more than the drama itself. Both players have continued practicing normally in the days since, with no reported further incidents, which suggests whatever specifically triggered Friday's fight was genuinely resolved between the two of them directly, rather than festering into an ongoing issue. How Kyle Shanahan's coaching staff actually manages McCaffrey's real workload through the remainder of camp, and whether that specific management visibly becomes more cautious in the direct wake of this particular incident will say a lot about whether this organization privately shares any real portion of the concern Greenlaw reportedly voiced out loud that day.